Okay, so welcome back to this video where I will try to explain what do I mean with classifying transactions. So you will do some exercise about this, don't worry so far. I will just finish the other conceptual videos and then I will explain the activity and the homework. But what you will have to do in here in this type of activities and homeworks when I will ask you to classify a transaction is first to tell me if if it is debit or credit in the transaction, depending on the perspective. That's why this is very important, perspective, that I will tell you the perspective. So that's the first thing that you need to know, that you need to tell me if it's credit or debit. Remember, credit, it's, and I will write it in here, credit, it's when the I don't know why I have the um, caps lock. So credit, it's when the money enters the country, right? So if the money enters the country, it's credit. And debit, it's when the money leaves the country. So remember that that's the first thing that you need to know. And the second thing is to classify the transaction according to the account. So we have current account. You can write like this, current account, it's okay. Financial and capital account, like that, or you can also say net errors and omissions, okay? Something important in net errors and omissions, sometimes it's difficult to identify if it is a credit or a debit. Why? Because sometimes these kind of transactions are kind of blurry. So sometimes it's difficult to find if it's credit or debit. If you can't find it, don't worry. Just let me know if it's net errors. But in financial and current account, of course, you can tell me if it is credit or debit. And finally, it is possible that I am asking you a tricky question, and the answer is there is no transaction. It is possible. You can tell me NA, like it doesn't apply or something like that. That's how you can answer, okay? So you, you can also tell me this. I think with the practice, it will be very clear. But why is it possible that you can answer that there is no transaction? And this is something very important. Also, please take note of this that I'm going to say. According to the author of our book, in the balance of payments, we only account for money, right? Only money, only money, cash. Well, not cash, it can be a credit card or whatever, but only money, right? Only money, not goods, right? So if I ask you, that there is a transaction where there is an earthquake in Mexico and someone sends food from Europe to Mexico, and I ask you, what's the impact of that transaction in the balance of payments? The answer will be, it doesn't affect the balance of payments. There is no transaction for the balance of payments because according to the author of our book, the balance of payments doesn't reveal anything that is not money, only money, right? So that's another question. Um, I sent my computer to the Europe and someone from Europe sends back a camera, a photo camera. Again, there is no transaction of money, so there is no transaction. Another tricky question. Um, I, uh, I send money to my cousin in Monterrey. There is no transaction of money, right? So you answer, it doesn't. If there is no transaction, doesn't apply, something like that. You can tell me however you want. So that's something very, very important. And I will give you 3 tips that will help you to solve these questions. Okay, I will write the three, three tips here. Okay, so Tip number 1, you should ask yourself, or more than tips, these are questions that you need to answer. And depending on the answer, it's what you will write in when I ask you. Okay, so question number 1, is there a transaction of money between countries? So this is the first question, and this one is very important because if the answer is no, if there is no transaction of money, maybe because I gave you the example of the American spring breaker, that he earned the money in Mexico and spent the money in Mexico. So there is no transaction of money between Mexico and the US. If that is the case, if the answer is no, you just finish the exercise and you say, there is no transaction of money. It won't appear in the balance of payments. Okay, so that's question one. But if you answer yes, if you answer there is a transaction of money, then go to question two. And question two is the money entering or leaving the country? And which country? The one that I am asking you to think on the perspective, like in this case, the US. So is the money entering or leaving the US? That's what you have to answer. If the money is entering, then credit. If the money is leaving, then debit, okay? So that's question number two. And finally, question number three. Which account is affected? So for this first question, you are going to tell me if it is current account or if this is financial account or if it is a net error. Because in a net error, remember that there is a transaction of money. It can be confusing to tell me this. That's why I told you at the beginning of this video. If it's net error, you don't have to tell me credit or debit. But if it's a net error, there is a transaction of money. Like in the case of selling drugs to the US, when Mexico receives the money, there is a transaction of money, but the account that is affected is the net errors account. If the account that is affected is because it's a financial asset, then it will be financial account. So let's do some exercises, okay? And we can practice with that. You will practice in the homework, don't worry about it, and in the activities, don't worry about it. So let's start with the first one. It says a German-based pension fund. So this is a German company, and the perspective is the US. Remember, this is super important. For this exercise, everything is the US. So a German-based pension fund, that is a German pension fund, it is in Germany, buys US government 3-year bonds for investment portfolio. So question number one, is there a transaction of money between countries? Yes, because Germany is sending money to the US to buy bonds, okay? So this is yes. Second, is the money entering or leaving the country? Which country? The US. Is the money entering the US? Yes, that means credit, right? And which account does it affect? Which account, I made a typo. Which account is affected? So which account is affected with this transaction? The financial account, right? So you only write FA, financial account. Let me give you another example. Let me try to find one in here. This one is interesting. So this next question, a Hong Kong student or Hong Kong students pay tuition to the University of California in Berkeley. So what about this? Is tuition a service or a good, or is it a financial asset? I think we can say that it's something like between a good and a service, right? Something like that. So it should be in the current account. But I think I made a mistake because I jumped the questions. I started with question 3, and the thing is that it's better if you start with question 1. So the first question, is there a transaction of money between countries? The answer is yes, between Hong Kong and the US. Is there money entering or leaving the country? Is the money entering or leaving the country? In this case, the money is entering the country, entering the US. So it will be credit. And which account is it affected? Current account. That's what we discussed earlier because it's paying for a service for education. So that's another example. Finally, maybe I think here I have another interesting example. So let me copy paste it. So in this example, it says a Colombian citizen smuggles cocaine into the US. He receives cash and smuggles the dollars into Colombia. So is there a transaction of money between countries? Yes, right? Is the money entering or leaving the country? Which country? The US. It is leaving the country. We can say that it is debit. And finally, which account is it affected? Net errors, right? Because smuggling cocaine, even though it's a good, it won't appear in the government accounts. So it will be net errors. And as I said earlier, if it's difficult to know if it's debit or credit, don't worry in net errors. In this example, I think it was clear that it's what debit because the money was going from the US to Colombia. But if it is difficult to find, don't worry. And finally, I think here I also have another interesting question, another interesting example that we can use to classify. We have this example. A UK corporation purchases a euro-denominated bond from an Italian MNE. So question number one, is there a transaction of money between countries? You can tell me yes, but is there a transaction of countries between the country that, of countries? Is there a transaction of money between the country that I care about, the country that is my perspective, the US? No, the transaction of money is not between the US and any other country. It's between the UK and Italy, right? It's not between the US. It doesn't affect the US. So that's why you can conclude NA. So this is another case when you can say that there is no transaction because we are talking about the US, okay? So if we talk about the US and there is a transaction that doesn't involve the US, we are going to conclude that it won't affect the balance of payments. Okay, so with this, I think we can close the topic about classifying transactions in the balance of payments. I think it's an interesting thing. It's not about practice. If you make a mistake, I think you will probably make a mistake on a homework or an activity because I will try to be as tricky as possible so you can have a mistake earlier and not in the exam, okay? So pay attention. If you have any questions, let me know. I will give you the activities and the homework, but I will also give you the answers. And in the Zoom sessions, we can have feedback face-to-face, well, face-to-face virtually, but we can have some feedback, or you can watch the videos with the answers because in the answer, I can explain the correct answer and also why is it tricky, like the logic behind it, okay? And I will try to give you a lot of examples, a lot of tricky examples, so then you can learn better. So I think with that, we'll finish this thing about the balance of payments in terms of classifying, like the exercises. And I will do more videos about the balance of payments, but in more, what is the connection of the balance of payments with international finance? Because I think I was teaching you something that's interesting, but maybe you are asking me, why is this relevant on international financial management? And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next videos.